Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ, Diwan-e-Ghalib, Meri Subani. To all our returning viewers, we are very happy you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now, if you were with me in the previous episode, you would know that currently we are going through Ghazal 23 from Diwan-e-Ghalib, Dar-Khur-e-Qahr-o-Ghazab Jab Koi Hamsa Na Hua. We have already covered 4 couplets from this ghazal. They are posted on the channel. Today we are going to pick the 5th couplet. As always, I'm going to read the couplet and then we will get into the keywords and concepts and impressions. So, this is how it goes. सीने का दाग है, सीने का दाग है, वो नाला कि लब तक न गया. सीने का दाग है, वो नाला कि लब तक न गया. खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा कि दरिया ना हुआ. So, let's do a quick approximate translation. First line, सीने का दाग है वो नाला कि लब तक न गया. The scars on the chest, by extension heart, are the laments that never reached the lips, that never got uttered from the lips. Second line, खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा कि दरिया ना हुआ. The drop that never made it to the sea became food for the sand, for dust. So that's a very one-on-one approximate translation. Now, this couplet has a lot of keywords. So let's start from the first line. सीने का दाग है वो नाला कि लब तक न गया. Sina. So Sina technically translates to chest, but by extension it symbolizes the heart within the chest. दुष्यंत कुमार का ये शेर देखें. मेरे सीने में नहीं तो तेरे सीने में सही. मेरे सीने में नहीं तो तेरे सीने में सही. हो कहीं भी आग लेकिन आग जलनी चाहिए. The approximate translation is, if not in my heart, then in your heart. Wherever it might be, the flame should burn consistently, continuously. By extension, the flame of love. Second word, Naala. So Naala translates to a cry, a lamentation, a wail. This is not your regular sigh, right, that one would take for small things. Naala usually has a very intense undertone to it. It usually emits from the depth of your heart, right, from the depth of your soul. Usually a very intense lament, cry or wail, drenched in grief, drenched in pain. इब्ने इंशा का ये शेर, नाला यूं नारसा नहीं रहता. नाला यूं नारसा नहीं रहता. आ यूं बेअसर नहीं होती. So the approximate translation is, it's not without rhyme or reason that a lament or a wail coming from the heart or a cry coming from the heart remains ineffective, does not hit its mark. And it is not without rhyme or reason that a sigh emitting from the heart is again ineffective. There has to be a very good reason. Otherwise, a sigh or a lament that emits from the depth of your heart will always hit its mark. ये शेर बहुत प्यारा है एंड इब्ने इंशा की गज़ल है, शाम गम की सहर नहीं होती. अगर आपको फुर्सत मिले तो ज़रूर इस गज़ल को एक्सेस करके देखें, पढ़ के देखें. And then last one from Ghalib, वो नाला दिल में खस के बराबर जगह ना पाए, वो नाला दिल में खस के बराबर जगह ना पाए, जिस नाले से शिगाफ पड़ते आफताब में. Beautiful couplet. The approximate translation is, the lament was not able to find even a space equal to the blade of grass in the heart of the beloved. My lament was unable to find even space equivalent to the blade of a grass in my beloved's heart. And this lament, mind you, created a crack in the sun itself by its heat and intensity. That intense a lament that created a fissure, that created a crack in the sun itself with its heat and intensity, did not find a place equivalent to the width of the blade of a grass in the heart of the beloved. So that takes care of Naala, and that takes care of all the keywords in the first line. Siine ka daag hai wo Naala ki lab tak na, ya lab, as we all know, is lips. Moving on to the second line. Khaak ka rizq hai wo katra ki darya na hua. Now Khaak is dust, sand. Rizq is, technically it is food. Technically it is food, your daily bread, something that you need to get sustenance, right? Something that you need for nourishment. That is what rizq is. असद बदायूं का ये शेर देखें, तलाशे रिस्क में दरिया के पंछियों की तरह, तलाशे रिस्क में दरिया के पंछियों की तरह, तमाम उम्र मुझे डूबना उभरना है. Beautiful couplet. The power of observation and detailing is amazing. So the approximate translation is that in my search for sustenance, in my search for my daily nourishment, just like the birds that fly over waters, just like the birds that fly over waters, I too have to keep drowning and then coming up for air, keep drowning and coming up for air in search of food. So as we know, right, there are birds that hunt fishes, right? And for that, they have to dive deep into the water, get the fish, and then come out pretty fast because they cannot stay in the water. They are a bird after all. But for food, they have to do this. They have to make that plunge into water. They have to be quick. They have to be sharp. They have to be exact, right? Get the food and come out. So that is the scene that is captured, like I said, amazing level of detail. And then सलीम कौसर का ये शेर, बस हमें इश्क की आशुफ्ता सारी खींचती है. बस हमें इश्क की आशुफ्ता सारी खींचती है, रिस्क के वास्ते हमने कभी हिजरत नहीं की. So the approximate translation is that the only thing that can pull me away to another destination, that can pull me away from my home ground, is the distress, right? Is the sickness of love, is the need for love. That is the only thing that will pull me away from my home base, from my home ground. Otherwise, रिस्क के वास्ते हमने कभी हिजरत नहीं की. Otherwise, for food and for sustenance and for livelihood, I never would migrate or leave or steer away from my home ground. Only love, need for love, affliction of love is strong enough to pull me away from home ground. So All that to capture the essence of Rizq, right? So it can be just simply food, 3 meals a day, but it can also be something more metaphorical, right? More mystical, wherein it symbolizes something that nourishes your soul, nourishes your heart, food for soul. So that takes care of all the keywords. Khaak ka risk hai, wo katra ki darya na hua. Katra we know is a drop, and darya we know is the ocean. Now, if you have been a DGMZ viewer for long, you know that this particular couplet, right? सीने का दाग है वो नाला की लब तक न गया, खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा की दरिया न हुआ. This particular couplet has been quoted by us to explain other couplets as part of impression for other couplets. That is the versatility. That is the universality of this couplet, right? It's a great couplet, and today we are going to put an impression around this couplet, the quotable couplet, which we have quoted so many times. So it is not going to be quick, it is not going to be easy, but it is going to be an interesting ride. So let's pick the first line. सीने का दाग है वो नाला की लब तक न गया. Now there are two critical concepts in this line that we will have to explore as part of our impression. First is Naala, which is the lament, the cry, the wail, right? And specifically the lament that did not get uttered, right? So that is one concept that we are going to explore. The second concept is, of course, Daagh. Daagh is a scar, a mark left, right? A scar. And again, in the couplet, specifically the scar that is left behind by this lament that never got uttered, that never reached the lips. A word has to be spoken, right? A step has to be taken. A tear has to be shed. An action has to be executed. This is required for these things to come into existence and fulfill their destiny of existing, of manifesting, right? And similarly, a Naala, which is a lament, has to be cried out. It has to be uttered from the lips. It is a sound that needs to be made. And especially when we are talking about a Naala from the heart of a lover who is suffering the pain and misery associated with unrequited love. Such Naalas, such laments from the heart of this lover are unique in their intensity of pain and grief. And when they are actually uttered out by the lover, they harness in themselves a power which is almost similar to that of a tempest, right? आप आलमा इकबाल का ये शेर देखें. इश्क था फितनागर ओ सरकश ओ चलाक मेरा. इश्क था फितनागर ओ सरकश ओ चलाक मेरा, आसमान चीर गया नालाए बेबाक मेरा. So the approximate translation is, my love, my passion was one of its kind. It was something magical, right? It was something very proud, and it was something very clever, right? This love of mine had all the makings of something huge, something out of this world, something in a class of its own, in a different league altogether, right? And hence, in this love, when I let out my lament, my unbridled, right, unbridled lament with no with no control on it, right? When I let it loose completely and let out this lament, it went and actually tore apart the heart of the skies above. That was the intensity. That was the intensity. And it is very important to keep this in mind. Like when we were doing the keywords, this is not a sigh. This is not a normal sigh a normal person does when they are feeling down. This is a lament from the heart of a lover who is suffering the pain and grief of unrequited love. This is in a league of its own, the intensity. So, all this to establish the fact that for a Naala, for a lament to come into existence, it has to be uttered. The sound has to be made. And when the lover lets out a lament, it is one intense thing, right? It is no ordinary sigh or wail or lament that a normal person would let out. But having said all that, in today's couplet, Ghalib has decided to illuminate the lament, the Naala, the cry that never manifested, that never got uttered, that never came into existence in the outside world. That is the lament Ghalib wants to talk about. Though this lament that Ghalib is talking about did originate in the heart, it never completed the journey to reach the lips of the lover and get uttered. Right? The sound was never made. Ghalib says that such unuttered laments get absorbed, get etched, get seared on the heart of the lover forever and ever as scars. Now, Naala originated from the heart, did not reach the lips, and got absorbed back into the heart, and ultimately became a scar on the heart. So that brings us to the scar, right? Daagh, Siine ka daagh, right? So now coming to the scars. Scars, as we all know, usually have a reputation of being perceived as the spot where something broke, a spot where something cracked under pressure, a spot where something crumbled under force. That is where you will see a scar. That is the usual perception. All scars are considered to be those weak spots where something gave away, right? The skin broke there, the thing fractured there, whatever it is, but it is a weak spot where the thing could not handle the pressure and it broke, fractured, tore apart, split apart. In addition, scars are also identified as something which is disfigured, ugly, something that does not look like its original natural self, something that has changed its appearance, and for the worse. It has become distorted and disfigured. So that is another usual perception that follows the word scar. And because of this perception, lot of efforts, right, made by people to hide their scars, camouflage their scars, cover up their scars, right? Nobody feels good about showing a disfigured, distorted scar. Now, for today's couplet, DGMZ believes that Ghalib is going to detail for us a different dimension, a different perception of scars, where scars are a symbol of strength. Scars are a symbol of pride. They are a symbol of resilience. This is a dimension where scars mark the spot of maximum strength and resilience. That is the dimension we believe Ghalib is going to show us via this couplet. But before we explore this different dimension through Ghalib's couplet, let's quickly see a special art form that also celebrates brokenness and scarring. So Japanese celebrate kintsugi. I might be pronouncing it wrong, and apologies if I am. But Japanese celebrate kintsugi, Kintsugi, which is a 15th century Japanese art form that involves repairing broken pottery or glass with gold, silver, or platinum lacquer. The art form is a reminder to embrace imperfection and celebrate life's flaws and missteps. The result is a functional piece that's more beautiful and more valuable because it was broken. Key principles of kintsugi establish that number one, a break is something to remember, something of value, a way to make the piece more beautiful rather than something to disguise. Number two, kintsugi symbolizes how we must incorporate our wounds into who we are, rather than just trying to merely repair and forget them. Number three, the scars are the design. The scars are the design. Your attention is drawn to the cracks and how they are mended. That is what you are supposed to see. The beauty is in the brokenness. And fourth, did you know that pottery can be repaired with gold? Then it's meant to be stronger than before and more beautiful. A beautiful art form that came to mind while I was putting the impression for this couplet, that how the exact place which was weak, which broke, which fractured, is converted into something so beautiful, so precious, and so strong by kintsugi. And then Khalil Gibran ka ye quote, right? Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. Right? Again, symbolizing the strength that scars stand for. Albert Hubbard ka ye quote, God will not look you over for medals, degrees, or diplomas, but for scars. God will not look you over for medals, degrees, or diplomas, but for scars. John Steinbeck, in his novel The Winter of Our Discontent, writes, to be alive at all is to have scars. Sign of life itself. Scars are sign of life itself. And then this last one by Rabindranath Tagore. When I stand before thee at the day's end, thou shalt see my scars and know that I had my wounds and also my healing. So, not just Ghalib in this couplet, but there is a totally different alternative school of thought around scars, where scars are not considered something weak, something distorted, something disfigured, something to hide, something to be ashamed of, something that shows that you failed, right? Cracked under pressure. No, scars are in fact exactly the opposite in this school of thought. So, in essence, the hurt, the crack, the injury is half the story of the scar. That is the first half of the story of the scar. The other half of the story is the healing that follows, the closure that follows, making that weak spot of injury stronger than ever, stronger than the spots that never cracked, never got injured, never got hurt. The resilience of a scar is much, much more than normal skin. Such are the scars that etch and brand the heart of the lover whenever his pain and grief-filled, burning lament originates in his heart but never completes the journey to the lips. Midway, his lament is held back. Midway, his lament is stopped, controlled, reined in by the lover, to be buried inside his chest. Now, one can wonder what possibly could be the reason for this. Why would the lover hold back? Why would the lover rein in a lament and not allow it to get uttered? Well, it can be any of the many reasons, right? Like lover's self-respect, lover's self-control, lover's होपलेसनेस एंड हेल्पलेसनेस. एक नाउमीदी, किस उम्मीद पे कहिए कि आरज़ू क्या है, रही न ताकत गुफ्तार, और अगर हो भी तो किस उम्मीद पे कहिए कि आरज़ू क्या है. हु इज़ लिसनिंग, राइट? इवन इफ आई अटर इट. सो एक नाउमीदी. बिलविड्स रेपुटेशन एंड ऑनर, बिलविड की पर्दादारी. इफ आई अटर समथिंग in my grief and pain, it might reflect adversely on her. So no, I will control that. वक्त का तकाजा, etc etc. So अब क्या रीज़न है लवर का? इनमें से कोई एक हो सकता है या इनके अलावा भी कोई हो सकता है, बट कोई तो रीज़न है where the lover decides that it is best to not let this lament escape my lips. Now, it's not an easy task, right? We have already established that these laments are very intense. They have a mind of their own. They carry in them the fire and fury of a tempest. And while they are on their way, full throttle, to be uttered through the lips, to rein them back, to pull them back and control them is not an easy task. Right? It almost brings to mind the picture of like holding a lit firecracker, right? Holding a lit firecracker that is supposed to shoot many feet high in the sky. And what you do is you hold that lit cracker and you make it abort in your hand. You don't let it shoot up. You hold it in your hand and it goes off with all its might in your hand. That is the type of self-control that comes to mind that a lover would have to exert to not let this lament escape. And one can only imagine the state of the hand, right? That would have held that lit cracker and abort it, control it in its hand. That's the lover's heart for you. That is the exact state of a lover's heart every time they do this exercise, right? How many such unuttered laments get aborted and absorbed in this heart? And every time this happens, it leaves a scar. We cannot even put a number to it. We cannot calculate it. But what we know for certain is that this would leave some scars, right? This would leave some scars. Each scar symbolizing a success, a victory, a strength the lover exhibited for all the reasons that we discussed, right? Any of those reasons. He had a reason that justified him holding back this lament. And every time he is successful in holding it back, no matter how torturous, painful, self destroying this exercise is, it is to his credit. It is a success. It is a victory. Ghalib in this couplet puts the spotlight on these unheard, unknown, non existing laments. Nobody knows about them. Nobody has heard them. They don't exist. But Ghalib's point is that just because nobody heard them, just because they never got uttered, just because they did not leap out into the outer world through the lips of the lover, doesn't mean that they were any less intense, any less painful, any less justified. It does not mean that it did not exist. It is just that the lover held them back. Now, we will end the impression of this first line with two of Ghalib's couplets, where you will see him glorifying the scars on the heart of the lover in ways that are different from the way he has done it in today's couplet. So, pehla sher. दिखाऊंगा तमाशा दी अगर फुर्सत ज़माने ने, दिखाऊंगा तमाशा दी अगर फुर्सत ज़माने ने, मेरा हर दागे दिल, मेरा हर दागे दिल एक तुखम है सर्वे चारागा का. So the approximate translation is that if I ever get the opportunity, if I ever get the chance, I will show this world. I will display for this world, right? That how unique each and every wound and scar of my heart is. Unique in a way that each scar is a seed that has the potential to give birth to a tree full of lamps. A tree which is decked all over with lamps. That is how Ghalib describes the scars on the heart of the lover. Each scar as a seed with potential of a tree that, when fully grown, will be covered completely with lamps. Such kind of light, such kind of potential for light in one scar, a full tree from one scar. And you can imagine how many scars the heart has. So that is one way he describes scars on the heart of the lover. And then the second couplet that we picked, लोगों को है खुर्शीदे जहां ताप का धोखा, लोगों को है खुर्शीदे जहां ताप का धोखा, हर रोज दिखाता हूं मैं एक दागे निहा और. Beautiful couplet. So the approximate translation is, mistakenly people think that they are looking at the sun. Mistakenly people think that they are looking at the sun, but actually what is happening is that every day I'm showing them one hidden scar on my heart. Every day I show them one hidden scar on my heart, and they mistakenly think the sun has come out. That is the light captured in the scars on the heart of the lover. So we genuinely believe that Ghalib considers scars on the heart of the lover as source of light, divinity, right? Not as something which is weak and disfigured and distorted and should be hidden. No, he's proud. Dikhaunga. दिखाऊंगा क्या फुर्सत दी ज़माने ने, क्या है वो, आई एम सॉरी दिखाऊंगा तमाशा दी अगर फुर्सत ज़माने ने, राइट. ही वॉन्ट्स टू proudly display his scars to the world. He is not ashamed of them. He wears his scars like a medal of honor. And that's where Ghalib is different. That's where Ghalib is different. Okay, that takes care of the first line. Let's move into the second line. खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा की दरिया ना हुआ. Now, to understand this second line, we will need to set up some background context, where we need to familiarize ourselves with the mystical Sufi concept that ultimate aim is becoming one with God or the Absolute. Ultimate aim of everything is to become one with God or the Absolute. And to explain this concept, the most frequently used symbolism is that of a drop of water that continuously throughout its existence tries to achieve its divine purpose of merging itself in the ocean, losing itself in the ocean. Now let's start with Ghalib himself. इशरते कतरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना, दर्द का हद से गुजरना है दवा हो जाना. One of our favorite shares at DGMZ. The approximate translation is that the ultimate joy, the ultimate ecstasy of a drop is to go and merge, to go and lose itself in the ocean. And the ultimate for pain is to hit its ceiling and convert it to cure. There comes a level of pain where it hits the ceiling and transforms into cure. Okay. So it is very clear that the ultimate destiny, the ultimate objective of existence for the drop is to merge and lose itself into the ocean, become one with the ocean. Once again, like he did in the first line, Ghalib decides to put a spotlight on a drop that will not be able to achieve its ultimate destiny, its ultimate objective of merging with the ocean. Per Ghalib, this drop will encounter a different destiny, a different end. Ghalib says this drop will become food for dust, food for sand. Now, in our humble opinion, the word risk is very important in this second line. And there is a very what is the word I'm looking for? Calculated decision Ghalib takes when he inserts that word in the second line. खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा जो कतरा की दरिया ना हुआ. Now, we already covered risk as a key word, where we saw that it is food or sustenance or nourishment, right? So, risk does cover sustenance and food required to survive, but it also has a very mystical and metaphorical meaning attached to it, where it is used to describe the nourishment of food that you need for the soul, for the spirit, right? And risk forms the root of the word Rizq, which is an attribute associated with God himself. God is supposed to be a Rizq, a sustainer, one who provides, one who nourishes, one who feeds, one who sustains you. Now, in this couplet, Ghalib's drop, and yes, we will call it Ghalib's drop, seemingly on its way to achieve its objective and destiny, crosses the desert. So it is on its way to go and merge into the ocean, get its penultimate ecstasy, fulfill its divine purpose, right? And on its way, it comes across the desert, a desert full of dust and sand, right? Now, when the drop is crossing this desert, right, it sees the dryness of the desert, the thirst, the parched state of the dust and sand in this desert. Now, this drop can justifiably think, well, I am a little drop on my way to meet the ocean, right? That is my purpose. That is my divine purpose. And I am having to cross this dry, thirsty, vast desert. But what can I do for this desert, right? After all, I'm just a drop of water. I would make no difference at all to the thirst, to the dryness, to the parchness of this desert. I won't move the needle even a little because I'm just a drop, a small, teeny, meeny drop. I would just get lost in this dust and sand. I can never, ever quench the thirst of this desert. It is better for me to continue on my path and go and meet my ocean. Right? If I was a drop, that is probably what I would think, right? Well, this is no business of mine. In my small little existence, there is nothing I can do for this desert. This desert is too huge, too dry, too thirsty. Right? Off I go on my way to my ocean. Now comes Ghalib's drop. Ghalib's drop also thinks, similar to this previous drop, right? That I'm just a drop of water. I cannot make any difference at all. I would get lost in this dust and sand. And I can never ever quench the thirst of this desert. It's too huge. It's too vast. But then, Ghalib's drop, it seems, thinks further and assesses that though it is true that the drop can do nothing at all to quench the thirst of this vast, dry, parched desert, there is this one grain of dust, one grain of sand next to the drop, which is equally dry, equally thirsty, equally parched like the entire desert. And looking at this grain of sand, looking at this grain of dust, the drop thinks, I as a drop do have the ability to quench the thirst of this one grain of dust. Quench the thirst of this one grain of sand. I have enough water in me. Somehow I have enough water in me to nourish this one grain of sand. And in that moment, it seems that this Ghalib's drop, right, assesses and decides that the thirst of this grain of sand, the thirst of this grain of dust is more important than the drop achieving its destiny of traveling to the ocean and merging with it. In that moment, the drop decides to give up its existence for a noble cause. The drop volunteers to become sustenance, risk for the grain of sand, for the grain of dust. In that moment, the drop chooses to become Rizq for that grain of sand and gives up its desire for ishrate katra hai darya mein fana ho jana. Gives up its ultimate ecstasy and joy of merging into the ocean and decides to play the role of Rizq for that single grain of sand. Ghalib did not pick that word risk just like that. This is the depth, this is the gravitas of divine purpose that he wanted to bring into this line by using that word. एक बूंद के वजूद में एक समुंदर का जिगर रखने वाली है ये गालिब की बूंद. Right? Despite the smallness of its physical form, this drop stays true to the vastness of its spiritual essence, of its divine purpose. And what is the purpose? What is the divine purpose of water or a drop of water? Quencher of thirst. Its essence and its divine purpose is to quench thirst. And that is why we think that once again, Ghalib glorifies this drop, which no one will know about. It will never become part of the big picture, the big ocean. But what it has done is so much more nobler. The drop opted to play the tough role of a razik, of a nourisher, of a provider, and gave up its ultimate destiny of being part of the bigger picture, being part of the bigger ocean. खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा जो दरिया ना हुआ, बन गया खुराक खाक की, and दरिया तक नहीं पहुंचा. So this is what the second line comes across to us as. खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा कि दरिया ना हुआ. And that takes care of the entire couplet. सीने का दाग है वो नाला की लब तक ना गया, खाक का रिस्क है वो कतरा की दरिया ना हुआ. Now, this is a Ghalib couplet, right? So, of course, it has multiple options. It has multiple routes you can take, multiple approaches, multiple interpretations. This is what we picked. There is also an alternative. One of the alternatives to this couplet is that you can take this couplet as a description of failure. Failure of the unsuccessful lament that never got uttered from the lips, failure of the unsuccessful drop that never could fulfill its ultimate destiny of merging into the ocean, and take the scars that these unsuccessful laments and unsuccessful drops leave behind as symbols of defeat, as symbols of unmet, unfulfilled destinies, right? The choice is ours, right? The choice is ours whether we want to see a victory in this whole thing or we want to see a defeat. You can probably support both. That is the beauty of Ghalib's Shairi, right? It allows you room for a personal interpretation, a personal impression. So we decide, we choose how we want to perceive these occurrences. Do we perceive them as victories or do we perceive them as defeats? This is DGMZ impression, but the complete impression will always be your own, the one that you create for yourself, basis your understanding of all what we have discussed and all that you relate to, all that the couplet makes you think about. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the impression for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know via comments what you liked or did not like about it. If you have any thoughts, do share it with us. Like I always say, it delights us to hear from you, and we say a big heartfelt thank you to the viewers who take the time and effort to interact with us. We really appreciate it. We draw our encouragement and motivation from your comments and feedback. Now, as always, for the new viewers, a very strong recommendation to access the episode titled Introduction to DGMC, because it will give you a good insight into the motivation and inspiration behind this podcast. What are we trying to do here? Feel free to go to the homepage of the channel, multiple playlists available there, segregated by topics. Surf through them and access episodes that interest you. Now, I'm going to close this episode. I'm sending a lot of love and light to all you dear viewers, and Thanks for watching.